All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. It is game day, guys. Very exciting matchup tonight between the Detroit Lions and the Dallas Cowboys. I know we're all pumped for it. It is going to be a heck of a challenge for the Cowboys, and we're excited to see how they do once again in prime time. Got some interesting news, some spicy news as we get ready for that matchup. But first, let's get things going as we always do with a little stat of the day, a little palate cleanser, if you will. And I want to pull up this graphic here talking about turnover differential right now going into week 13 of the 2025 NFL season. And you can see the Chicago Bears have the best turnover differential in football up to this point at plus 17. That's well above the pack of second place of the Bucs at plus 9, the Texans at plus 9, and the Rams at plus 9. You can see then the Steelers at plus 8, the Jaguars at plus 6, and then so on down the line with the Vikings at minus 15, the Jets at minus 12, and Washington at minus 8, bringing up the rear. But not far from the bottom of the pack is the Dallas Cowboys at minus 5 turnover differential. And traditionally speaking, turnover differential is the biggest indicator in terms of how good your team is, right? Turnovers obviously have a massive impact on each individual game and certainly the season at large, right? If you have a great turnover differential, you usually win a lot of games. We saw that during the Cowboys' three season run of 12-win seasons. They forced a ton of takeaways, which of course really helped propel them to a lot of victories. This season, though, minus 5 in turnover differential. Only the Titans, Giants, Commanders, Jets, and Vikings are worse. So we're talking about a bottom quartile team in turnover differential, which usually means you're going to struggle. And when you factor everything the Dallas Cowboys have gone through this season, right, let's focus on just on the field things here for a second. We know the off the field stuff with Parsons and the drama that caused, and of course the tragedy with Marshawn Kneeland. But let's focus on the field here for a second. You've got a new coach, new defensive coordinator, new offensive coordinator, new staff, right? You've got a ton of injuries. Starting the year, entire secondary banged up. Revel, Carson, right? Overshown out most of the year. Even a guy you brought in, even though he wasn't playing great at linebacker, you brought him in to be a veteran guy. Sanborn got hurt. You were forced to go Shamar James, 5th-round rookie, a guy who was a preseason guy who wasn't even active the first few weeks of the season. He became an every snap player. That's not ideal. We know the O-line at different times has been decimated with injuries. Obviously, Guyton's still out, although Nathan Thomas is stepping up. Miles Sanders, veteran running back, has been out for the year. Malik Davis has had to step up, but again, he's essentially a practice squad elevation guy who's getting a lot of playing time. How about wide receivers, right? We know, of course, CeeDee Lamb missed some time. Turpin missed some time. They've had to go through some volatility there. Tolbert's basically inactive at this point. Pickens' his first year with the team, right? We've seen a lot of volatility across the board with this Cowboys team on the field. How about penalties? Hasn't been pretty penalty-wise. They're the most penalized team in football. And you can see here the turnover margin. They're bottom quartile in the NFL. And despite all the challenges, and some of it's self-inflicted, like the penalties, like some of the takeaways, of course, and some of it's just, comes with the territory, new staff, new schemes, new strategies, injuries. Again, they've had injuries just as bad as anyone else. They haven't been, let off scot-free. Like, for example, the Broncos and the Patriots are teams that have been super healthy. The Rams have been relatively healthy as well, for example. There are other teams, I would argue, maybe had it worse. Washington's been pretty beat up this year, for example. But the reality is the Cowboys have been, I would say a little bit below average in terms of getting the bad end of injuries up to this point, right? Things, of course, can change. You're getting healthier now, which helps. But when it comes to on the field, they've had, not perfect luck. It hasn't been a magical season. The injuries have been impactful. They're, again, minus 5 in turnover margin, a lot of penalties. This is a team that has their fair share of struggles. They haven't played top-notch football, obviously, the vast majority of the season. And yet here they are in the thick of it come December. And I think that's something to hang your hat on. This is a team trending in the right direction. One of the things to look out for is if everything breaks your way and you're having a season where everything's going right, the Bears are a good example of that. Phenomenal turnover margin. They're having all these massive last-second victories, comebacks against the Giants, comebacks against the Cincinnati Bengals, for example, come to mind for Chicago, right? And you have that kind of team and it's a magical year, you would expect to be good, right? You have an easier schedule, right? Think you expect to be good. But the real tell to me of a team that's trending in the right direction is when things are going bad. The Cowboys, a lot of penalties, a lot of turnovers. They're not forcing a lot of takeaways, right? If we're being totally honest with this defense. They've had their issues with the injuries. They've obviously had the off-the-field stuff that's undeniable. And yet, despite that, they're in the thick of it. And I think that's a sign of a team on the upswing. Because if they play better, if they reduce the penalties, if they get more takeaways or protect the football better, if they have good injury luck, right? If the off-the-field drama, hopefully in the future, God willing, is less, then the team will be better. And to me, that's a great sign for the future of this club. All right, let's get into the news here. This is courtesy of Joseph Hoyt at Dallas Morning News, talking about Siobhan Revel Jr. and how he has been an impressive force at corner for the Dallas Cowboys. It's a good piece by Hoyt. I recommend you guys check it out. But I just pulled a clip from it because I think it's very interesting. It begins, he continues to amaze me, man. Cowboys head coach Brian Shottenheimer said earlier this week, it's so fun to watch him grow. Revel has been a willing learner too. When he visited the Cowboys prior to the draft, he recalled telling the team that he wanted to learn more about zone coverage. He wanted to learn all the little details, especially because it was so unfamiliar to him. His build is perfectly designed for the man coverage he mostly played his entire life. He estimated that 90% of his college career at East Carolina was spent in man coverage. There were only a few situational exceptions that called for running zone. One NFL draft expert fittingly described Revel as a boundary bully. He wasn't known as a zone savant. Defenses in the NFL require an understanding of both man and zone. Even some matchups require that type of versatility. The thing about corners, you cover different skill sets each and every week, Cowboys defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus said. In the game, too, you might be playing right, left, the corners are traveling. It's different each and every time, so it's important that he studies and learns the position in terms of who he's covering and how you cover this particular guy. That's the unique thing about the NFL. All right, so Revel, again, the takeaway here is how impressive he's been. He was a guy, like the report mentions, that played a ton of man in college. Now, that doesn't mean he can't play zone. It doesn't mean he shouldn't play zone. There's some people out there that say, well, he was so good at man coverage in college at East Carolina. Why are the Cowboys putting him in zone situations? They should match the scheme to the player. Listen, that's not a way to success. We've seen that the last couple weeks, right? Dallas playing Philadelphia and Kansas City. Both their defensive coordinators, Fangio and Spagnuolo, they had players that are good in man coverage, and they left those corners on an island against CeeDee Lamb and Pickens, and Lamb and Pickens roasted both of those guys. Right? If it weren't for the drops, Lamb would have had easily back-to-back 100-yard games, and Pickens, of course, had big games in both those performances. You got to be willing and able to do both. Now, you could argue Eberflus's concentration in terms of zone versus man is too one-sided, and the when and where he calls certain coverages is up for debate. That's fine. That's an argument that can and should be made. The reality is you've got to be able to do both. And just because a corner played man in college and did it extremely well doesn't mean he should in the National Football League. Dak Prescott essentially was Tim Tebow light at Mississippi State with a lot of quarterback power. And then he came to the NFL, yeah, he did some zone read stuff, but running quarterback power with Dak Prescott would not have been a recipe for success. Treating him like Taysom Hill would not have done good things for Prescott. Giving him a modern NFL offense with some zone read stuff mixed in, like they did his rookie year, allowed him to grow and develop. That's the right approach. You don't draft players and say, well, you're really good at press man, for example, and we're going to have you only do press man because it's going to make you really good your rookie season. You got to develop. The Washington, at the time, Redskins, with RG3, created an offense that was very simple and allowed him to do what he did best. But the problem is it stunted his development, and when he had the unfortunate injuries, he didn't have a modern NFL passing game to go back on. He's basically said as much sense, right? He said, listen, I was put in a situation to succeed very early on, and it worked out very well. But once the injuries came and I lost that superior athletic ability, things fell apart. You've got to have young, talented players develop. You got to put them in positions to learn how to play NFL football the right way. That's what the Cowboys are doing with Revel, and they trust him enough because Revel is earning that trust. Snap in and snap out, game in and game out, and that leads to the news for tonight's matchup that I think is really impactful. This is courtesy of Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Cowboys cornerback Trayvon Diggs will not be activated off of IR for tomorrow's game against the Lions. He has been ruled out. Left tackle Tyler Guyton has also been ruled out with an ankle injury. Jadeveon Clowney, hamstring, and Malik Hooker back are questionable. Clowney practiced in a limited capacity today, a good sign for his potential availability on Thursday night. All right, we'll get to the other injury news in a second, but I want to talk about Trayvon Diggs. He's been practicing all week. He's a guy that's obviously had a lot of time, had his concussion, and had the knee issues leading up to the Washington game earlier this season. Long time ago. A lot of things have happened, of course, since prior to that Commanders game at home, going back a month and a half at this point. Feels like much longer than that. It's been crazy the kind of year Dallas has had. That's one of the things, going back to my opening point there. It hasn't been a smooth sailing, nice and easy year. Kind of 2023 in a lot of ways felt kind of like smooth and methodical. A lot of easy games, some injuries, but not a cataclysmic amount, not a lot of drama, right? It felt smooth and easy. 2024 was not smooth and easy. 2025 has been a whole nother level. You've had everything that could go wrong has gone wrong with the Cowboys for the most part. And yet here they are. So I think that's a credit to the Cowboys, the players, and of course the coaching staff. But again, back to Trayvon Diggs being ruled out. To me, this is a vote of confidence in Revel. right? This is a guy here that obviously has played pretty good football over the course of the last 3 games. He has had 2 penalties, hasn't done anything, horrifically bad in terms of, he has had, I think, a missed tackle here and there, but he's done some good things, right? He hasn't been a liability in anything yet. Obviously, playing corner, it's going to happen eventually. You're going to give up a big play or two. You're going to give up a bad game or two. Deron Bland's a good player, and he got eviscerated by the Cardinals, for example, a few weeks ago. He's come back and played good football ever since. So again, that goes with the territory of being corner. The reality is the Cowboys had Trayvon Diggs, a veteran they still really like. To a man, every member of this team, every member of the coaching staff has said, we are excited to get Trayvon Diggs back. We need him back. And he practiced all week, but they didn't activate him. Why? Because they believe in Revel. If you look at this Cowboys secondary, especially the cornerback room, it is so young, right? Deron Bland's a savvy veteran of the bunch. He came to the NFL in 2022. We know Reddy Stewart's a second-year player, but this is his first year actually really playing. Of course, Revel's a rookie. Carson's a second-year player who missed the vast majority of his rookie season due to injuries, and he missed a lot of this season due to injuries. He's essentially a rookie. So this is as young as you can possibly get in the secondary for supposedly late season push, maybe to the postseason, although the odds are against Dallas the way things sit right now. The reality is a lot of teams, they go veteran. They'd say, hey, rookie, you did a good job. We're going to replace you with the veteran, or we're going to at least work in Trayvon Diggs. We're so excited to have Diggs back. We're going to force him back. But the Dallas Cowboys, they look at Diggs and say, nah, you may be 99%, but if you're not 100%, we're going to go with the rookie. And that is faith in Revel. That's not an indictment on Diggs, because they've been saying how good Diggs has been. They've been saying how good he's looked in practice. He's done a lot of good things for this team. Seems to be trending in a great direction. And obviously, we know Carson's coming off an injury, right? Malik Hooker seems to be good to play, but he's got some back issues, right? Maybe you'd want veteran corner help, right? Obviously, in a tough matchup on the road against a very explosive offense. The reality is the Cowboys coaching staff, Shoddy and Eberflus, both of them together, I'm sure, said, we trust Revel more than enough. And that is a huge statement. The Cowboys believe in this promising rookie. We've talked about it always since the Raiders game. They're elevating him, his snap count, more reps, more opportunities, more situations. That continued against the Kansas City Chiefs, and that continues against the Detroit Lions. Doesn't matter if it's prime time. Doesn't matter if it's Thanksgiving. The Cowboys believe in Siobhan Revel, and the right to believe in him, because every step of the way, he has embraced the challenge. He's been willing and able to learn. He's been far from perfect, right? There's a lot of things to work on, but for a young player, the Cowboys were so high on and so excited to get in the third round. He has lived up to the expectations and more, and I think it's a smart move for the Cowboys to keep riding this rookie, to keep giving this opportunity. Listen, it doesn't mean he won't have bad games. He's going to have bad games. Corner's a tough position. But the faith and belief they have in number 34 is absolutely outstanding, and I'm excited to see what he does, not just tonight, not just the rest of the season, but the rest of his career. All right, when it comes to the rest of the injuries here, listen, Guyton being ruled out, no surprise there. Nathan Thomas becomes the starter once again. Had a good game against the Chiefs. Tough matchup, of course, with the edge rushing of Aiden Hutchinson. Most likely a combination of Steele and Thomas will have to face him. So a challenge there for the Cowboys for sure. So obviously losing Guyton is a tough blow, but not insurmountable. We've seen that, of course, over the past week and a half with what the Cowboys have done in his absence. Clowney, hamstring, and Hooker. I think Hooker's got a pretty good chance of playing based on what I'm hearing. Clowney, it's going to be a game-time decision kind of thing. I think the Cowboys with Shottenheimer, they gave Clowney a lot of rope, right? Because obviously if a player doesn't practice or only practices in a limited, you're like, yeah, you're not going to play. But Shoddy said, listen, man, he's a veteran. He's a leader. He's done a great job working with the young guys. We're going to give him sort of the privilege of going through a pregame warm-up with a limited practice to see if he's good to play. And I think that's a smart move by Shoddy. I really do, because there are some players, and I think Clowney is one of them, especially veterans, that you treat differently, right? You sit there and say, listen, man, you don't have to do, if you don't practice, you don't play. You've earned it with your leadership. You've earned it with your pedigree. You've earned it with your experience in this league. You've earned it with what you've done in the locker room and on the practice field on this team up to this point. He's done more than the Cowboys could have hoped for. He's been an outstanding addition in the middle of the season. Again, credit to the Cowboys for going out and getting him, especially after two really bad performances on defense and weathering the storm as they try to integrate him into this team. And listen, Clowney hasn't been perfect. He's had a couple bad offsides penalties that have absolutely decimated Dallas. But overall, net, he's been a great addition. And him not being available against Detroit would be a huge loss. It would force Sam Williams and Fowler and company to really step up, specifically Sam Williams. And that would give the Lions, I think, no offense to Williams, but if you look at Williams' season at large, he's been better the past couple of weeks. But with Williams' overall run defense, especially in pass rush too, has not been great at all for Dallas this season, which would be a big boon for Detroit. So again, the Cowboys, I think right now with Clowney, I would say he probably doesn't play, but they'll see how he does in pregame warm-up. It'll be interesting to see, obviously, what he does if he can play, right? If he is even able to play. It's one of those things where, how banged up are you? How fresh are you? I think that's going to matter a big deal for the Cowboys down the stretch, especially tonight. But again, it's one of those things everyone focuses on. You got to win tonight. You got to win tonight. Listen, it's a long season. You take it week by week for sure. But the reality is there's still, even after tonight, guys, there's still 4 more football games left. There's a lot of evaluation being done. There's a lot of, hey, who's on the bus, who's not on the bus. There's a lot of time to figure that out. And listen, if Sam Williams gets an opportunity here, now's a good opportunity with Quinnen Williams and a revamped defense to see what he does with it. I think earlier this season he struggled. Obviously, he had the block punt that gets special teams. But other than that, a lot of not so good. Played better football over the past couple weeks. Let's see what he does if he gets the opportunity tonight. If he takes advantage of it, good for him. Maybe he's a guy to keep around as a depth piece. Definitely something to keep an eye on. All right, this next report here is courtesy of Patrick Walker. It was a few days ago, but I wanted to talk about it. He responded to a report or an image from another beat reporter, Calvin Watkins. Watkins posted an image saying it's cold and miserable and the Cowboys are outside practicing. And then Patrick Walker responded, had them practicing in the actual rain a week or so ago, so I sense a theme here. 1, grass. 2, this is football, so be a football player. Shoddy's culture is real. Yeah, one of the things that I love about Shoddy, what he has done is he has turned the country club mentality. And it was true, right? We all understand that under Mike McCarthy, it had become a country club team and a little bit under Jason Garrett too, although he tried to instill some feistiness and some fight. I think there was a lot of the players like Des Bryant, for example, that really kind of brought that out. But I think with Mike McCarthy, they became a true country club team. Veterans loved it, right? It was, hey, listen, if there's one drop of rain, if it's below 55 degrees outside, indoors. Right, they had kind of light practices. In terms of practicing in the rain, what would they do? They'd wet the footballs indoors or something like that to get them used to it. Shawnee's a completely different animal when it comes to. He says, no, we're going to practice outside, and he mentioned this right earlier this week. Said, listen, we got to go on the East Coast to finish out the season to Washington, to New York. We got to learn to play outside in the cold and the wet and the ugly, and I think that's the right approach to take. And again, it speaks to Shawnee's mindset. He's not a guy like McCarthy in terms of, I'm just trying to win this week. McCarthy was the guy, whatever it took to win this week, this year, right? Try and get to, whatever record to get to the postseason and then let the chips fall where they may. Shawnee's always thinking about the process and the systems, right? To put it another way, Mike McCarthy, nothing against McCarthy. He's won a lot of games. He knows a whole lot more football than I do. So if it comes down to it, if Mike McCarthy's talking football for 30 minutes or I'm talking football for 30 minutes, go watch Mike McCarthy. I'm not denigrating him at all when it comes to that. But Mike McCarthy was much more a goals-oriented coach, right? Let's win this week. Let's get to, remember his whole thing? We got to get to 11 wins. Once you get to 11 wins, you can start talking playoffs, right? Shoddy, a little bit different. He's a systems-oriented coach. He's like, okay, we got to learn how to practice. We got to learn how to go through situations. We got to handle the rain, handle the cold, right? In terms of the competitive atmosphere, we're going to have a meritocratic system. You can be your starter all season long. We'll cut you, Kyer Elam, if you're not up to snuff. Right, once guys come back, right? That's been Shoddy the entire way since they first hired him. Obviously, people have seen the HBO Hard Knocks NFC East. Shoddy's gotten rave reviews. A little bit of a, the Cowboys are in the middle of a 3-game winning streak, so everything is obviously going to be inflated to the positive. If the Cowboys were in the middle of a 3-game losing streak, or like the Eagles who have lost back-to-back games, the vibes would be different. So there is some of that recency effect going on, but it's clear Shoddy's installing a new culture. He's eliminating the country club and putting in an actual grown-up, workman-like, accountability-driven culture. I'm a fan of it. All right, this next report is courtesy of John Machota under that same vein. Inside the Cowboys revival, Brian Schottenheimer's leadership amid loss, trades, and turmoil. I just credit him for being the same, being consistent. He's a hell of a leader. He's the right guy for the job. We're all following him. So the head coach, especially if he's offensive-minded coach, really has 2 main responsibilities. The first one, and by far the most important, is to develop a good and productive working relationship with your quarterback. And that obviously is a check the box there from Shottenheimer. Now, to be fair, Mike McCarthy had a good relationship with Dak Prescott as well. I think McCarthy versus Shoddy and Clayton Adams' scheme was not nearly as good. Shoddy Adams really helps out Prescott a lot when it comes to play calling and scheme. So I think Shoddy's been better than McCarthy in that department, but they both check that box. But the leadership and authenticity has been really, really important. And you can tell just by the energy, the competitiveness that he brings to this football team. And one of the things I love about Shoddy is he is who he is. He's been this way the entire time. You go back to training camp, and let's talk about making brutally tough decisions, right? You've got a guy here that had a bunch of corners, Booth, Pride, Keeman Hall, playing a lot in preseason, right? Competing for the last few spots. What does Shoddy and the defensive coach do, right? Who's going to make the team? Answer is none of them. We're going to bring in Reddy Stewart. We're going to trade for Trequise Bridges, right? That's who's going to make the team. Kyrie Elam starts the entire year. He's answered, he's played. The Cowboys have asked a lot of him. Hey, man, you got to do all these situations. You're going to start one game, rotate the next, start the next game, put in tough situations. Didn't play, great, to be fair, but he played the entire year. What do the Cowboys do? Hey, man, you're gone. We're going to start a rookie, right? It's just that time. Hey, Sam Bourne, we brought you in, right? We know you're beat up a little bit. And Kenneth Murray, we want you two guys to be the veteran linebackers. You're not doing very well. You get hurt. Shamar James is our guy going forward, right? Rookie 5th-round pick. Hey, Damone Clark, right? You've played a lot of football. You're an outside linebacker. Well, we're going to change you out for Leafau, and eventually you're going to get cut. Hey, Jaden Blue, you're the fan favorite. People love you. You're going to spend most of the season as a healthy scratch, right? The list goes on and on and on with Shotty in terms of what he's been willing to do in terms of being a tough leader. You talk about benching Pickens, benching Lamb before the Monday night game against the Raiders, right? He has done things that have been at the same level in terms of ruthlessness in a good way that a guy like Jimmy Johnson would be. But he's also a great emotional leader. He connects with these players. He's been the stabilizing force. And that's necessary for any team, especially when you're dealing with what the Cowboys have gone through. I talked about it after the time with the tragedy with Nyland. I said, listen, it's going to be tough for the Cowboys just to mentally prepare for any of the remaining games. And since then, they've won 3. Right now, obviously, a big part of that is adding more talent, but let's give credit to the coaching staff for being the stabilizing influence to allow these players to step up and execute in a really tough situation. They had 3 games right after a tragic passing of a teammate, which is an incredible thing to overcome. I mean, it gets overlooked in the media because it's so somber and people don't want to discuss it. But guys, that's just absolutely brutal for a teammate, for a locker room to overcome. And regardless of what happens tonight or the rest of the season, the Cowboys have done a great job battling through that. I mean, they could have totally collapsed. They could have totally collapsed after the Micah Parsons trade. They could have totally collapsed after the injuries to Lamb, Turpin, Tyler Booker, and Cooper Beebe to start the season, along with a bunch of other linemen. Overshown still out, right? Deron Bland missed time. It's one of those things. They could have totally collapsed. But they hung together. And it speaks to Shawnee's leadership. And again, if you watch every week 1, preseason, training camp, mini camp, OTAs, offseason, Shawnee has been the same authentic person every step of the way. And that's really important. Again, it's early in his career. We're still got a lot of football left just for this season. But as time goes on, Shawnee looks like a better and better hire for the Dallas Cowboys. All right. This next report is courtesy of me responding to Joseph Hoyt. So there was a story. That I say story in air quotes, that happened ahead of Monday Night Football between the Giants and the Patriots. You guys may have been aware of this, where Abdul Carter was sort of benched ahead of the game for breaking some team rules. And it later was announced that he missed a special teams meeting or something to that effect. And this is at least the second time publicly it's been reported that he's missed meetings or something like that. And so there was a parody account on X, sort of, fake account that said, the reason he was suspended is because he was caught during a meeting and watching what I'll say is explicit material. I'll just word it like that. Now, obviously, that report, when you read it, is clearly false. There's no way that would ever be publicly released because it just wouldn't, right? But it was put out there just because it was sensational and it was a parody account and it was designed to get attention, likes, and clicks. And a bunch of people, including reporters and fans, fell for it to the extreme, went absolutely viral. And Joseph Hoyt, who's a good reporter for the Dallas Morning News, writes this, talking about someone who fell for the report. He said, honestly, it's very understandable why you fell for the report. Deciphering what's real and what's fake has never been more difficult online. Wes Stanberg, which was the parody account that posted this, looks like an actual account of an actual reporter. We used to have a verification system that worked. Now we have mass chaos and disinformation. So I responded, the problem is that the verification system created an environment where verified reporters were given extra credence even when they were 100% wrong. I prefer the Wild West. For what it's worth, smart people didn't fall for the fake account when it comes to Carter. So here's an important thing, and this was after the fake post and the fake news that came out of the report when it came to Carter's suspension, or benching, I should say. I said, listen, and I think this was true for a lot of people. I'm willing to bet if there's any of you watching this show that saw the report on X or wherever ahead of time, you said, oh, that's fake, that's not real, and dismissed it offhand. That's what I did. Because this is what smart people do. That's what adults do. That's what grown-ups do. Right? Joseph Hoyt here says, oh, it's understandable why that you could fall for it. Not if you're a smart person. Not if you have one functioning brain cell. And this is a point I've made all the time, not just in football, not just in media, just in life in general. I think there's a rule that say you don't manage or lead to your bottom 10%. Although that kind of is what happens, is that's a problem organizations run into, right? You have your bottom 10% of employees or workforce, and they're, for whatever reason they've got flaws, or they're not as hardworking, whatever it may be. And there's some organizations that manage and lead to that bottom 10%, right? And you say, we got to do everything we can to help those guys out. And they neglect their middle 80, which is the core of your organization, and your top 10, which is what carries you over the top. Can you imagine if NFL team worked that way? Like, that would be the Dallas Cowboys, for example, giving Jaden Blue, even though he's going to be a healthy scratch, every single rep in practice and spending all day, every day working with him instead of Javonte Williams, instead of Malik Davis, instead of anyone else, right? And that's just would be stupid. That'd be silly. Instead of game planning for the Lions or any other team going forward, they said, oh, we need to work on Jaden Blue, making him build his confidence up. That would be hilariously wrong. Now, that doesn't mean you ignore Jaden Blue, but you focus on the middle 80 and the top 10. That's what good organizations do. The problem is a lot of people in real life, when they say, well, people fell for this report, this fake report, yeah, the bottom 10% of people did. The not very smart people did. I know that sounds mean, and some of you may be like, oh, you should say that. The reality, it's true. There are instances in life, and I think we've all been on the wrong side of this at different points. I know I was a bunch, especially when younger, still am sometimes, where you do something that's stupid. You do something that's moronic. You act like an idiot, or you fall for a trap, whatever it may be. It's important to understand, yeah, if you fell for this or did that, you're an idiot. Listen, I do dumb stuff all the time still. I try and mitigate that and minimize it, but I think we all do to a certain point. I think it's part of growing older and maturing, hopefully eventually for me. But the reality is there are people out there, and I'm picking on Hoyt here because he's a great reporter, recommend his writing. He's A++, 100% fantastic. You should follow him if you don't already, if you have social media platforms. But the reality is we shouldn't manage to the bottom 10%. Anyone who fell for that report clearly isn't very smart, clearly doesn't have common sense. And I think that's important. We got to get back to a society and just a group, whether it's sports, media, or just everything all together, where it's like, yeah, we can have some base intelligence that's assumed to be baked into the cake here. Because if we don't, if we have to be spoon-fed every little piece of information and we have to live in a world where you have to be told what to think and what is real and what is not real every waking second of every day, guys, we're in a very, very bad place. And you know what? I'm the optimistic view. I think the vast majority of people, when they saw that report, they either dismissed it offhand and said, yeah, that's fake, or said, yeah, it doesn't sound real, I don't buy it, I'm going to need corroborating evidence. And I'm willing to bet that's the case, because guess what? I see you guys in the comment section every day with a lot of smart takes. I'm not blowing smoke, I promise, but you guys have a lot of smart takes, a lot of smart insights. I see it on X too, people that engage and comment with my social media platforms there. The reality is, I think the vast majority of people are more than smart enough. Again, that's when I say we don't manage to the bottom 10%. Let's manage to the middle 80 and the top 10. And I know a lot of you guys are in that 90%. I bet most of you guys are in the top 10%. This is I don't want to say a highbrow show, but we try and be a little deeper, a little more, getting into the weeds. I bet most of you guys wouldn't have fallen for this. In fact, I bet none of you did. Because anyone, I think, with functioning brain cells didn't. And I think worrying about not to be mean again, the lower class of intellectual capabilities people, how they reacted to this post, doing that and building some sort of policy based on that, that's just not a smart move. All right, this next report here is from Ari Myrov, and this has kind of been going around yesterday evening. A new record, the Chiefs versus Cowboys game on Thanksgiving drew 57.2 million viewers, making it the most watched regular season game in NFL history per Richard Deitch. The previous record was 42.1 million. That was Dallas versus New York, I believe, in 2022 on Thanksgiving. So the record was shattered by a whopping 15 million. Now, to be 100% fair, the NFL kind of changed how they do ratings because of streaming and things like that. So, for example, the early game was about 44 million. So that would have, if the Cowboys didn't play the Chiefs, the Lions-Packers game, which was a great matchup and a great game, of course, that would have barely been ahead of the Cowboys in 2022, the Cowboys-Giants game. So that's an important distinction, an important point to make. However, it speaks to the power, again, of the Dallas Cowboys. And listen, give the Chiefs credit. It's Mahomes. The Chiefs are good. They're the current dynasty right now in the National Football League. So that's a big role, too. But the power of the Dallas Cowboys is just undeniable. Whether they're playing well or whether they're playing not, they want to be on TV. People want to see them. People can't help but to watch the Dallas Cowboys. And listen, whatever you want to say about Jerry Jones, this is a lot of what he's built and maintained in Dallas in terms of making them interesting by hell or high water. I talked about this yesterday, where 17 of the past 21 years, the Cowboys have come into December after Thanksgiving, technically in contention. I know 2020, they sort of were, but I don't really count that year very much. And I guess technically in 2004, because of a bad NFC, they technically were as well, but I don't count either of those years. You can actually make an argument they were still technically in the hunt, after Thanksgiving, 19 of the last 21 seasons, but I kind of put those 2 years to the side. The reality is the Dallas Cowboys are relevant, and people, for whatever reason, just can't tune them down. Whether it's Romo, Des Bryant, Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Pickens, people can't turn away from the Dallas Cowboys. Whether you love them or hate them, they are the most powerful brand in sports. And I'm going to say this really definitively here because it's the truth. They are the most powerful sports brand in history. Fact. No other organization can drive ratings like this consistently. If you look at the top 5 biggest in terms of media market games, or top 10 in a season, top 10 in a decade, whatever it may be, pick a block. Top 10 Sunday night football games, top 10 Thanksgiving Day games, top 10 4 o'clock games, top 10 1 o'clock games, ratings wise. 8 of the 10, 9 out of 10, or sometimes 10 out of 10 will be Dallas Cowboy games. The power of the Dallas Cowboys is insurmountable. No team comes close. And I think that's give credit to Jerry Jones, give credit to the Cowboys, give credit to the history, and give credit to the players, right? If they weren't playing well, if they weren't entertaining, none of this would matter. But I think people continue, for whatever reason, to discount the incredible power of the Cowboys organization. There's no other franchise in sports history, that even comes close. All right, this next report here, going a little college football action, but there's sort of a lesson here I want to talk about. So Lane Kiffin, obviously, for those of you who aren't familiar, was with Ole Miss, and then was offered jobs reportedly with the Florida Gators and then with the LSU Tigers. He went on to take LSU's job, the head coach. He's going to be the head coach for LSU. Obviously, Ole Miss is going to the playoffs, so he left in the middle of the playoff, took a lot of coaches with him, right? There's some drama there, obviously, a big challenging situation, weird college football schedule, the way that works, but they have their playoff literally when coaches are allowed to leave. I mean, so it's kind of a funky deal there. So Lane Kiffin posted this on social media, and I want to read his statement, and then a player afterwards responded to it, and then I'll give my thoughts on this. Lane Kiffin wrote, "After a lot of prayer and time spent with family, I made the difficult decision to accept the head coaching position at LSU. I was hoping to complete a historic 6-season run with this year's team by leading Ole Miss to the playoffs, capitalizing the team's incredible success and their commitment to finish strong, and investing in everything into a playoff run with guardrails in place to protect the program in any areas of concern. My request to do so was denied by Keith Carter, the Ole Miss AD, despite the team also asking him to allow me to keep coaching them so they could better maintain their high-level performance. Unfortunately, that means Friday's Egg Bowl was my last game coaching the Rebels. While I'm looking forward to a new start with a unique opportunity at LSU, I will forever cherish the incredible 6 years I spent at Ole Miss, and will be rooting hard for the team to complete their mission and bring a championship to Oxford." It's from Lane Kiffin. And then a player came out, and a couple players have done this. All right, Suntarine Pickens, I guess, responded, says, "That was not the message you said in the meeting room. Everybody that was in there can vouch on this." So here's the problem, Suntarine. You need to understand, and this is youth. This isn't your fault. You're a young guy. You're a kid. That what grown-ups, what leaders, what bosses, what managers, and you're going to work for people, Suntarine. We all do. We all will. What they say publicly and what happens internally, guess what? It's different. We all know this, guys. And everyone with, again, half a brain cell knows this. There's some people in the media that said, "Whoa, this is crazy. Like Lane Kiffin's lying." Listen, we've all worked for corporations, or a lot of us have. We've all worked for companies or organizations when they put out a PR statement. What happens when a high-ranking executive gets fired at a company, guys, and gets kicked out the door? Everyone's mad at them because they stunk. They did a terrible job. They're fired. What's the company press release say? We'll call him Joe Blow. Joe Blow has decided to take further different opportunities, and we're excited for Joe Blow, what he will do going into the future. He was a great member of this team, and we are thrilled for all the work he did. We're excited for the potential of the team we have now, the direction we're going to go to, but we're also very happy with Joe Blow's contributions and wish him nothing but the best. Thank you, Joe Blow. Right? That's what it reads. And internal, it can be Joe Blow was the worst executive of all time. He was a terrible manager, was a terrible person, was always late. All this stuff was fired for cause. Could have been all those things. The PR release, that statement, will be completely different. That's the way the world works. And one of the things that frustrates me about the college system, and I think, it speaks to the point of education. We think that education needs to be, do you know how to do linear algebra? Can you quote Shakespeare? Can you explain to me, can you read a cash flow statement? Whatever it is. Can you talk about the history of Vincent van Gogh? Whatever, right? But the reality, education is just learning how the world works, how things work, how grown-ups act, how situations act, how organizations operate, what it takes to succeed in life, in business, and just everything in general. And that's one of those things that I feel like, especially now, a lot of these institutions and football programs too play a big part of this when it comes to these kids. They don't teach them how the world works. These kids think, and you see this because people respond to Perkins's post here and say, "Oh my goodness, Lane Kiffin lies." Guys, this is how the world works. And I know you guys watching this, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. I feel like a lot of you guys are like, Nick, you're saying things we already know. Like, let's get to the Cowboys news. And I hear you. But I just see stuff like this. I'm like, man, we are failing this next generation here because none of them in college are learning how the world works. Not even remotely close. They're getting 100% wrong. PR, internal, is different. We all know that. And yet no one came out and said this publicly. No one responded, on ESPN, Fox Sports, or any other major institution and said, yeah, Suntrine, or yeah, whoever. Yeah, listen, what Lane Kiffin's going to put out in terms of public and what happens internal, that's different because that's what happens. That's the way the world works. We all know that. But people at ESPN, people at Fox Sports, whoever, didn't say that. The big talking heads on social media didn't say that. And that makes me wonder, wow, do they not know? Do these big, experts on these big shows, do they not understand how the world works? And my guess is they probably don't. And I think that's a shame. All right, let's get into the comments, guys. All right, let's pull up a member comment first, courtesy of It's Juma3231, regular commenter, which, by the way, I appreciate all of our commenters, all of our viewers, all of our members. But you regular guys, very entertaining, as always, very insightful, right? Really gets me thinking about different topics. So I greatly appreciate guys who regularly comment. It means a lot to me. But anyway, It's Juma3231 writes, I agree with you on the running back room. Outside of Javonte, our running back room has been suspect for years. I'm looking forward to the competition in training camp, and maybe they draft a late rounder again and see what happens. I do think they will, right? And I do think full competition next year for 100%, especially even if Williams comes back. They're going to say, listen, Blue, Maffa, whatever rookie they add, like the 5th or 6th round, and assuming Williams comes back, but if he doesn't, Malik Davis in the mix, I would assume as well. You guys duke it out. Right. And I know the running back room, people don't want to hear that because, oh my goodness, it feels like 2024 again, and I get it. But the reality is, it's just where you are. And until you hit it out of the park with like a Tony Pollard, that's just the role you have to take. Don't use a first-round pick on the running back. Look at the Chargers. First-round pick, guy gets hurt. That was a tough pick. How about the Raiders with Ashton Genty? Not helping out a lot. Ezekiel Elliott was a hit for sure. But those are few and far between. Also, a lot of comments mad about Pickens and CD feeding off each other. And I don't get it. When are fans going to realize this is a team sport? For example, there's a stat that either has to do with EPA or success rate, but when Pickens and Lamb are lined up on opposite side of the field, success rate is significantly higher than when they are lined up on the same side. Pickens is a dog for sure, but defenses up to this point didn't respect them the same way they do CD and got punished for it, but they will going forward. We got 2 wide receiver ones, guys. Stop pitting them against each other and be happy we have 2 receivers with extremely different skill sets. Yeah, exactly. If you look at Pickens and the performances he had in Lamb's absence, kind of a quiet day against the Jets, but did have the big touchdown and 2 monster games against the Panthers and the Packers. The reality was those teams basically played man-on-man, and they said, oh, we can cover Pickens. We've seen Pickens with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was their game plan, both Carolina and Green Bay. Right, we're going to man-on-man, and we'll just ride with it. Because, listen, Pickens, we've seen him. He'll maybe make a great fade catch. He'll maybe make a circus catch or something like that. But he does nothing consistently, snap in and snap out, and he eviscerated them. Now, part of that, of course, is the fact that Pickens is with Prescott. Part of that is the shoddy offense. But part of that is Pickens, again, living up to his talent now that he's in a better environment as well. But going forward, teams are going to react to that. And that's why Lamb's success and Pickens' success is tied together. If you look at the film, every single big play that Lamb has is because, I shouldn't say every single play, a lot of the opportunities, especially if it's one-on-one, is because Pickens draws attention. If Pickens has a big play, it's because Lamb draws attention. And it's one of those things, they work and feed off together. Now, both of those guys can and would thrive by themselves. We saw that with Lamb last year. We saw that with Pickens with the 3-game stretch this year. We saw it at times when Pickens was in Pittsburgh as well. But the reality is when both are playing together, they work incredibly well. And we should totally understand that's how it works. And that's how it should work. That's one of the reasons why it's good to sign and extend Pickens. Obviously, if it works out for the right dollars, I think they'll get it done. Because them working together as part of a 1-2 punch makes this offense elite. Fact. This offense is an elite offense when those 2 guys are working together at a high level. We've seen it on Sundays. You can look at the film. You can just look at the numbers. Whatever you want to look at, those 2 guys working together, and especially that they work so well together, is elite. 2 different skill sets that marry each other perfectly. Together, again, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. People sit there and say, well, Pickens is doing great. He is by himself. But with CeeDee Lamb in this offense, he's elevated. Same thing with Lamb, and that's really important. Dino Lochan 9397 writes, hey, stumped the narrative about Pickens' success is based on what Lamb was doing. When the 3 games Lamb was not in the games, Pickens' production was still there. These games gave Dak more confidence in Pickens, and that was the real reasons Pickens is getting more targets. Look at the games Lamb was not there, and you get Pickens productive. Lanoy had his first 100-yard game. I'm not saying Pickens and Lamb together are not more dynamic and lethal. What I'm saying is Pickens is thriving because he is talented with the best QB he has ever had and a more efficient offense, including running game, as well as a star and Lamb on the other side. They complement each other, but one does not make the other, especially because the two have different skill sets. Enjoy Pickens for what he brings to the table. He was doing these things since his Georgia days in college. Well, my point is, and if I didn't communicate this, that's on me, is that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, like I said a second ago. Lamb by himself, if we're going to put a number on it, let's just say he's a 9 player. Pickens by himself is a 9 player, let's say. So, but when you add them together, you don't get 9 plus 9 is 18, you get 20. Because together they complement each other, and together Pickens is more explosive. Even against the Packers and even against the Carolina Panthers, he had some monster efforts for sure. But was that really sustainable? He got a lot of one-on-one coverage. People didn't know how to play Dallas because no one had any snaps of Lamb prior to that, without Lamb prior to that. So Pickens got a lot of favorable matchups, and the Cowboys took advantage of it. You insert CeeDee Lamb into the fold now with Pickens, teams don't know what to do. And that's what we've seen the past 3 weeks. And I think that's why this team will be very efficient offensively, obviously over the course of the long run, both this season and for the future, right? Together, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And that is my point. Joe Pye 88 writes, this man brings cold to hot, love the holistic analysis without the infotainment. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously, you can take a look at my background, guys. That's super entertaining, super jazzy. Look at these graphics. I've got basically a poor man's slideshow going on right now, so it's not exactly the most entertaining thing in the world. I'm going to try and improve on some of that in the offseason. Not too much. I'm going to keep the format the same, but see if I can do something. But yeah, I love the deep dives, and I want to hear your takes too. That's what I love about this, is the fact that, it's not surface level. If you want surface level, go watch ESPN First Take, right? Which, again, great production, highlights, graphics, all that stuff, but that's surface level. My goal, and I think a lot of your guys' goal as well, is to really think and dive deep into some of these topics. That's what I enjoy, and I know looking at the comments, that's what you guys enjoy as well. All right, this next comment is from PA Longhorn 421. Agree on JD's availability. Hopefully he plays. I don't believe anyone expected this much out of him, and he's been performing while helping the young guys out. Also, his pressure opposite Ezzy is needed. If he doesn't play, all DBs better be ready. Could get interesting. Biggest game of the year, in my opinion. It's one of those things. I don't disagree with anything you said there, but when you start playing and winning some big games, which the Cowboys obviously have done in the last 2, each game gets a little bit bigger. Right, and it's one of those funny things. I forget what it was. There was this columnist I used to like who used to say biggest game of the year this week, like the game of the year this week, where every game this becomes bigger and bigger as you work your way through the season. Now tonight is a big game, but it's also a game, right? They have 4 more games outside of it. If they win this game and lose all the other ones, doesn't matter. If they lose this game and win all the other ones, will it matter? Again, it's something we'll have to see, of course, but yeah, I think it's obviously going to be a fun matchup tonight. Challenge for the defense for sure. Challenge for the offense for sure. Challenge for everybody. Going to Detroit, tough environment, raucous environment. It's going to be an interesting to watch, no doubt about it. One Up D808 writes, the thing is we got guards that like pulling in space. Being multiple is Shoddy's calling card, not just with the O-line. Yeah, I think that's one of those things that Shoddy and Clayton Adams have done a great job doing in terms of CeeDee Lamb can line up all over the place, right? You put motions and shifts with both Lamb, Turpin, right? I know a lot of people aren't a fan of it, but they'll have Turpin or Lamb line up in a running back, right? And, people don't like it, but it's part of the multiplicity of this team. The guards pulling, tackles pulling, right? Centers pulling. BB does like a pull thing on a lot of play action concepts, right? That's who the Cowboys are. They're very multiple with their players. They don't just line up and play. Mike McCarthy did a lot of lining up and playing. And listen, if you've got more talent, it works out great, because you simplify the game and your talented guys just eviscerate the inferior talent. But when the talent gap's a little more narrow, like you have in tough matchups, or sometimes you don't have as much talent, again, like in tough matchups, that's where the coaching really stands out, and that's what we've seen from the multiplicity of this Cowboys offense this season, and it's obviously been a big reason why. Again, negative turnover margin, right? A lot of penalties. It's been a lot of sloppiness. They've had their fair share of injuries and, of course, the off-the-field stuff. The coaching, the schemes, it matters. That's been the difference to keep the Cowboys at least in this thing as we start December. Uncle Bubba knows everything. 9143 writes, I know this isn't going to be a popular opinion, and Wanye Thomas has already addressed this himself, But after the passing of Nealon, the team seems to be playing a different brand of defense. I know the addition of new players has helped, but it seems a fire has been lit in this team. As an old Marine myself, I know the teams are hardened by trauma and hardship. It weeds out the weak and sharpens the remaining men. The old iron sharpens iron saying is absolutely true. Every man needs a purpose and a mission. Hopefully the remaining players have found theirs. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Yeah, I've never been in a situation like that. I played college football, and obviously I hope no one who ever plays football, or no one ever has to deal with that. I know it's a reality in the world we live in. But I talked about it at the time. I said, listen, I from my experience, I don't know how you game plan. I don't know how you practice, right? Going into the Raiders game, I said, I don't know what this team is going to look like the rest of the way. I don't know what you do mentally, physically. I didn't mean that like in a bad way. I said, I just don't know. And they certainly have responded. Obviously, adding more talent helps out this team for sure. Shotty's leadership has been A++, 100%. Over the, really all season, he's done a great job, but certainly since Nealon's passing. Listen, I don't know if it motivates the players or not. The players will be the ones that could tell you that one way or the other. But I do think it gives a little clarity of purpose, right? In terms of why are we here? Why are we doing this? And sort of, well, if we're going to be here and do this, we might as well be here together and do our best to compete at the highest level. And I think that matters to people, especially since Nealon was a high effort, high motor guy. And we talk about a lot of effort plays showing up for Cowboys over the past few weeks. There could be some of that where these guys look around and say, listen, there's this thing that there's deeper things in this game, but what we play and what we do together does matter. And we need to put our all into this. Could there be that sort of element? For sure. But I tell you what, it speaks to the sort of maturity of the men in that locker room, and of course their leader, Coach Schottenheimer, for what they've done. They exceeded my expectations. I think they've exceeded all of ours coming out of that tragic situation and the way they've played and the way they've handled it. All right, this next comment is from Travis Graham, 7636. Speaking on the Jaguars, I'll never forget when they had all that hype in 2018 and they came to Dallas, 40-7 later, and that team was never the same again. We had McGregor show up that game too. It was awesome to be at and experience. I remember that. The Jacksonville Jaguars of 2017, obviously Saxonville, right? They were a team on the upswing, right? They make a magical run during the postseason. They go to Foxborough. They're leading by double digits in the second half against New England. The Patriots pull out a squeaker of a come-from-behind victory, but everyone's like, okay, Jacksonville, no longer a punchline. The Jaguars have basically sucked the prior decade ever since Del Rio left. Okay, they're now a good team again. They figured it out. Defense, elite. Quarterback, good enough. They got some offensive playmakers. Going into 2018 with some momentum, and then early in the year, they got absolutely smacked by Dallas. That was pre-Amari Cooper, by the way. So, again, it was an impactful game. It sort of set the narrative that, okay, Jacksonville, 2017 was magical. You're still a bad team. That was a moment. I remember that. That was a game a lot of people thought Jacksonville was sort of a get-right game against Dallas. All right, prove you're really, because Dallas was sort of a mediocre offense at that time. Prove you're a good football team. Go into Dallas, win a big game on the road, and Dallas just smacked them, right? That was certainly a shift, and the Jacksonville Jaguars really haven't been good since 2020, until really about 2022, right? And even then, they've been kind of just okay. Good season this year, but I mean, really, there was a run there, a moment there where people like Jacksonville has arrived in the AFC, and then one trip down to Dallas, and that ended. Doug Simmons, 2344, writes, hell yeah, the Landry shift. I agree Landry was 20 years ahead. That man was playing chess while the rest of the league was playing checkers. Yeah, Landry is one of the smartest people that's ever coached by far. Before Bill Belichick, before Bill Walsh, he was the guy. Obviously Paul Brown is up there as well. We have the Vince Lombardi trophy, and I get all of that. And, it's one of those things. Every single thing and I've said this 1,000 times, but I'm going to keep saying it. Every single thing you see in today's modern NFL game, analytics, drafting, evaluation, motion, shifts, shotgun, third down backs, 2-minute drill, gap defense, right? The middle linebacker itself was a Landry invention, right? The reality is that goes back to Tom Landry and the Dallas Cowboys. And that's why, again, the Landry shift to me is such an important thing the Cowboys do, because it's sort of a message both to themselves but publicly and to the NFL. And we all know this, right? Any other team understands it too. The modern NFL game is because of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s Dallas Cowboys. Listen, we understand the West Coast offense. Bill Walsh had a role in that for sure. But that offense doesn't become anything. And here's sort of the irony of it, until they beat Dallas in 81, right? At that moment, it was sort of they're a good team, but sort of nothing special. They beat the Cowboys, they beat Landry. Oh, suddenly something special's here, right? That's what matters. The Cowboys, historically, have mattered. They have set the standard. All right, BMR Collects writes, I'm just thrilled to have both Lamb and Pickens on this team. They both play different styles, so I don't know how fans/media can say one is better than the other. They are both studs. That's all that matters in my opinion. I just want the Cowboys to win, however they have to do it. Yeah, I do think winning is the most important thing, obviously, and they're two really good players. And CeeDee Lamb's a guy who I think is, the way he's worked with Pickens to integrate him and work with them in their relationship, A-plus leadership from Lamb. He showed A-plus leadership and toughness last year, continued it with how he's dealt with Pickens. Fantastic. CeeDee Lamb is a great player, but underrated for his leadership and maturity. Not perfect in that department, but done a really good job. People don't talk enough about that, in my opinion. Delta 704. I've thought about this often. Assuming the Cowboys have world-class medical and rehab staff, they absolutely should target top talents and use their resources outside the draft to make them a hit. Talking about getting players, in the second and third round who have injury concerns and maybe first-round talents, but they got some injury bugs. How, look at Jalen Smith, didn't work out. For example, as a guy who obviously had big-time injury concerns, Sean Lee had some injury concerns in college. They did not spend first-round picks on him, but theoretically, again, a second-round pick, on an average basis, has a 33% hit rate. If you get a guy who's a first-round talent with a 50% hit rate in the second round, assuming your medical staff can get him squared away, that's a lot of value there. It is a good strategy. We just see all the misses who would have been a 67 miss rate and a 75% miss rate anyway. They aren't looking exclusively at hurt players. They're evaluating these guys and saying no one here is healthy is better than the guy when he gets healthy. And that's the argument to be made, right? And I think that's a great point. I think that's what the Cowboys have tried to do. And Revel seems to be trending in that direction. We'll have to see long-term, of course. But the reality is you want to add good players. That's a fact. Now, if there's some risk profile baked in, you got to factor that in, of course, with the injuries. But the reality is you always want to be adding good football players. Is a guy a good football player? And I understand the best ability is availability. And if there is long-term issues and the injuries come up, it's deflating. Van Der Esch, Jalen Smith, of course, Sean Lee, obviously. But the reality is, bar none, you want good football players. If you get good football players, you will win in the long term, regardless of whether they have short-term, medium, or long-term injury concerns. Get good football players. You bake in the risk profile, like I just said, but the reality is if you go after and acquire talented guys, that's the approach. And that's what the Cowboys have done. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't, but I think it's the right strategy. All right, that's enough of the comments for today. Obviously, fun game tonight, guys. It's going to be an interesting one. Obviously, Detroit desperate. They're in the middle of their title window, and right now they're even outside the playoffs. At home, trying to figure things out from their perspective. The Cowboys have some momentum. Both teams, of course, dealing with injuries. 3 games in 11 days. It's going to happen. The reality is we're going to see what the Cowboys are able to do on the road. Their last 2 victories against good teams have been at home. That certainly plays a role into it. We'll see what they do in Detroit. Obviously, it's going to be an interesting one for sure. Big challenge for this defense, especially this rush defense, going up against an elite, maybe the best rushing attack in football, maybe the best running back duo in football. I think they are, in Gibbs and Montgomery. But we'll see what happens, of course, and I'll be here tomorrow morning to break down the effects and everything that happened after the game with you. But until then, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.